Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are continuing our look at the games of the great Swedish player Gideon Stahlberg. And here we are going to have a look at a very exciting game that he played against the great Efim Bogolyubow in Stockholm 1930. Bogolyubow doesn't get such a good press nowadays. He lost two World Championship matches to Alekhine quite convincingly, and in 1929 and 1934, and this has really influenced people's opinion of him. But he was very well respected during his career. Really, one of the world's best players for quite a few years. Particularly mid 1920s to mid 1930s. And he was a very exciting player. I think, I've looked at lots of games of players of that era. And if you find a game against Bogolyubow, you're bound to find one that was totally bananas, totally crazy, and all over the place and very, very exciting. So, he really was an exceptional player. I've analysed a lot of his games, some here on this channel, others on my blog, and always really enjoyed it. So this is a very exciting game indeed, where Stahlberg plays the exchange Slav, and Bogolyubow sort of makes something huge from it. So let's have a look how this all came about. So d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, knight f6, takes, exchange Slav, and then knight f3. Well, you're going to see that a little bit later that Stahlberg puts his queen on b3, and I was talking about my blog. I was looking at that recently, and I came across some analysis I'd done of Marshall's game against Emanuel Lasker. A whole series of them, about 5 or 6, I think. And Marshall was a big advocate of the exchange Slav. And he played 5 queen b3 against Emanuel Lasker in New York 1924, and came very, very close to winning in actual fact. So what's the idea of putting the queen on b3? Well, you attack the d5 pawn, you attack the b7 pawn. You're just trying to restrict this bishop on c8, stop it from developing to f5. In this game, Stahlberg played knight f3, knight c6, bishop f4, and now Bogolyubow played a very interesting move. He played the move knight e4. Bogolyubow explained this move by saying that he didn't like dull positions, and he didn't want to give Stahlberg just some sort of dull exchange Slav, so he was looking to liven things up a bit. In actual fact, this move during my professional career became very, very popular, and when I first saw it I thought, wow, what an idea. But actually Bogolyubow had already come up with it in 1930. Just shows that not all ideas that people come up with in the modern times are new. Sometimes they were just thought up by much older players somehow, but this was definitely one of those. What is Black's idea? Well, Black's got a number of ideas. Black can play like Bogolyubow played in the game, or you could also just take on c3 and play g6 and sort of play it a little bit like a Grunfeld type structure. The engines would just want to play e3, e6 and bishop d3. When you can also go g5 if you want there. This was a torch against Stockfish game. Bishop takes c4, g takes f4. But Stahlberg played the move queen b3 here, just trying to stop the bishop from coming out to f5 later by attacking these two, as we said. I'm not sure how logical that really is in some ways. I think when you've put the knight on e4, you're not really going to play bishop f5 as well. But I guess also that Stahlberg just wanted to defend the knight on c3 early, because of course with the knight on e4, Black might play a move like queen a5 or try and play bishop b4. So Stahlberg just wanted to get that defended already. e6 was played, and now maybe a little bit of an incautious move here from Stahlberg. Rook c1 is what the engines were looking at, just holding off with e3 and bishop d3 just for a couple of moves, and that would have been quite sensible, I think. Stahlberg played e3, and now he got hit with g5, and this gives him a bit of a nasty little dilemma, because after bishop g3, which is what he played, you get hit with h5. Yeah, I mean, h4 is threatened, just actually winning this bishop, and white's got to decide what to do. Now, the engines were actually looking at playing knight takes e4 in this position. G takes f4, and now a couple of possibilities. You could play knight ed2, takes, and the point of putting the knight on d2 is not a great square for the knight, but the queen is defending the pawn on e3, so bishop h6 no longer has any real purpose there. If you play the knight to c3, then we take and go bishop h6, and you've got to find a way of defending that pawn on e3. Actually, king f2 is possible, but castle queenside was also what the engines were doing. Bishop e3, king b1. This is quite an interesting position. I mean, black's got a nice solid centre, and the two bishops as well. But white's got some play here, because obviously the black king, is going to have to find a spot somewhere, and we've got open files, and this bishop's a little bit of a target. This was Stockfish against Torch. Let's have a look at one typical game. Bishop f4, rook e1, castles, bishop d3, king h8, g4. Just aiming for h4, maybe knight g5 or g5, h5, g6. Quite interesting, not bad at all for black in principle, but white's definitely got some chances there. So yeah, all sorts of depends really what sort of type of position you want to play there. But that would definitely have been the best way of playing it. After bishop g3, h5, well, what the engines want to do is simply play h3. So allow this. So a little bit awkward, but white just wants to sacrifice the g3 pawn. If you attack it, it's not going to get defended. And yeah, I mean, the engines were just going castle queenside again, and then going king b1, and then playing some sort of aggressive position. I mean, the one thing that's maybe not quite nice about it is that when you castle queenside now, then you can go knight a5, bishop b4, rook c8. Maybe a little bit awkward for white, but you've got stuff like knight e5 as well. It's kind of the engines thought that it was going to end up kind of balanced, a little bit sharp, but balanced. For example, have a look at a game Torch against Stockfish here. E4 takes, d5, opening things up. The idea is this ef, we go de, and if fe, then you'll have queen g6 check. Quite unusual, that one. Never seen that one before. So queen e7, queen takes e4. Rook c8, king b2, queen c5, and then you just bail out with queen b4 here, and well, we got some sort of equal type of position. Rook e5, takes, knight c4, rook c4, knight g5, and rook d5, and the game eventually ended in a draw there. This is Torch against Stockfish, but yeah, I mean, you can see white's got quite a few possibilities, but you've got to decide, to sacrifice a bit of structure and then just give up a pawn, But apparently, Stahlberg spent a very long time in this position and then went for something rather bananas. I've mentioned this a few times in actual fact. Stahlberg, I think, Stahlberg really became a world-class player by sort of reining himself in. I mean, when he was young, he was playing, as I saw in this wonderful biography that's come out about Stahlberg recently. He was playing quite unusual stuff like the birds opening and everything, and he had his own systems. He was playing some sort of Jabava London system, and also the Veresov as well when he was young. But I think to become a strong player, he reined himself in, became solid. But that little devilry was still in there, and the right player, someone like Bogolyubow or Keres especially, was able to draw that out of him, and then he was willing to sacrifice stuff, and that's what he actually did, because he played bishop d3 against Bogolyubow, and now knight takes c3, b takes c3, and h4, and after bishop e5 f6, the bishop is trapped. So Stahlberg obviously had an idea here, but the engines are not at all impressed. It's minus 2.95 already in this position. So they basically just think, this piece sacrifice is absolutely nothing. But obviously in the human context, it's always possible to cause some problems. So knight takes g5 was played by Stahlberg. And now knight takes e5, destroying that bishop takes. f takes g5, bishop g6, and now Bogolyubow played king e7. Yeah, king d7 was also possible. Might have been my choice, to be honest, but king e7 was played by Bogolyubow, and then castles. So what have we got here? Well, I mean, in all fairness, it doesn't look that great, does it? One pawn for the piece. Black's got the two bishops. Got that double pawn on e5. King's a little bit awkward on e7, but not really restricted somehow. I mean, the key thing is white going to be able to open stuff up with e4, c4, and f4. You know, and is black going to be able to find some sort of decent place for the king? Well, I mean, what the engines want, and that is pretty sensible, they wanted to play the move rook h6, just to kick away that bishop from g6. So that gives the king a little bit more space, and then a move like queen c7 afterwards. And yeah, they really felt that yeah, that black was going to be all right in this type of position. But there's, you know, quite a few ways of playing it. Bogolyubow's queen b6 was quite sensible. Just offer the exchange of queens and then see where white wants to go. So queen c2 played by Stahlberg, and now h3 from Bogolyubow. The engines quite like this. I mean, yeah, again, probably you know, from a human perspective, something like bishop g7, you know, to be able to maybe put a rook on f8 if white goes f4, or play rook h6 after would have been quite sensible. Also bishop d7 as well, you know, just to be able maybe to put the king to the queen side if necessary. One nice thing about queen b6 for black is that, you know, it is kind of dissuading white from playing f4 because of the move queen e3 or g takes f4 there. So queen b6 from that point of view was quite nice. h3, it's quite interesting. You know, you're trying to weaken the white king side, and also you're setting yourself up for you know, for future attacks. I mean, if white goes something like g3 and then your queen gets attacked and then move over to c6, then there's a move like d4 and queen g2. But yeah, I suppose the one thing that makes you slightly nervous with black is that obviously you're spending a tempo on something like that. Maybe white can use that for an attack. But the engines actually thinks is a pretty decent move. It's very typical of Bogolyubow, in my opinion. You know, he was always very optimistic. He was obviously just thinking, let's just finish this off. Attack the white king's position. So e4 was played by Stahlberg. I mean, the moves are pretty much as good as anything else, really. There's c4, there's e4, but yeah. H takes g2. Again, the engines are very interested in something like rook h6, rook b1, queen c6, and you know, they're happy to have an isolated pawn on d5 like this. I mean, the rook and the queen are combining here. You know, yeah, what does white really have here? It doesn't look like very much. It really isn't very much at all, to be honest. But Bogolyubow played h takes g and then rook e1. And now Bogolyubow did something really strange, actually. I think he was obviously sort of maybe worried about something like e takes d5 and then e6 happening, maybe something like that. And he just decided that he wanted to keep everything close. But what he did, well, it was a little bit strange. He played the move d4. And I mean, maybe actually, I think he was also thinking about trapping this bishop on g6. He thought, I'll play d4, and then this queen is no longer able to cover the bishop, and then I'll be able to attack the bishop with h6. It's not so silly, but it's kind of ambitious. And you know, when white plays c takes d4, you've suddenly got this nice mass of pawns in the center that can you know, sort of power through. And of course, you're also opening the c file as well. And well, the king's not safe yet, so. Yeah, it just feels like it was just a little bit too much somehow. But I think that the idea was possibly to get this bishop on g6. So queen d2 was played by Stahlberg, and it's still minus 1.75 for black. But it's going to be a little bit annoying, this. We're threatening queen takes g5 check. So black actually had to play bishop h6, and now white plays c takes d4. And, you know, the key thing about having put the bishop on h6 is that now the bishop has got a square on h5 to escape. So the bishop's not in any danger anymore. I mean, black might have something like g4 and bishop f4 to start attacking the white king, but it's not mate yet. And well, at the same time, you know, there are diagonals open now towards the king. I mean, if the queen moves away from b6, we might have queen b4, and you know, the king's a little bit awkward there. So yeah, I mean, basically by doing all this, you know, Bogolyubow's kind of hit the randomizing button, I think, and you know, that can only be, you know, pleasant for white somehow. I mean, I think the fear of getting checked along this diagonal is what prompted Bogolyubov to play king f8. And to be honest, this looks like a very sensible move to me. I think it's pretty much the one that I would have played. The engine's not so impressed, thinking it's just 0.58 now. They want to keep on. They wanted to play g4, open up the bishop, queen d1, and then queen d8, and start thinking about getting that queen over to the king side, maybe with queen f8 into f4 or f3 even. But I mean, I think you have to be pretty brave to do that. I mean, I would be trying to get my king away from there as quickly as possible. Bishop h5 played. Yeah, I mean, the engines wanted actually to play the move queen d1 and maybe look for something like queen f3. That was what they were looking for. But yeah, I mean, it's all it's more about move orders. They're a bit difficult to sort of judge really, because at some stage white will have to go bishop h5 because the black king will come to g7. So yeah, bishop h5 looks pretty reasonable to me. g4 played, and then queen c3 from Stahlberg. Just controlling the pawn on d4, thinking about doing some checks, thinking about invading on c7, and obviously thinking about playing d5 as well. Queen to d8 and bishop g4. And you know, the nice thing about what white's done now with the bishop on g4 here is that white's going to be able to play h3 and consolidate that king side. So actually, you know, black's plan of playing h3 takes g2, it's exposed the white king, but actually it hasn't really done that much damage. And well, now the black king is completely denuded of pawns. So yeah, you know, even if the engine thinks that you know, black's still a lot better and that black's still doing fine, I think from a human danger point of view, you know, this has not been successful at all. Bogolyubov played bishop d7 just to get the try and get the queen side developed, and now d5. I mean, already by now games are ending up as draws here between the engines. What the engines really wanted to do, instead of a quick d5, was to play something like queen g3, and then actually try and get the rook over to here. You know, rook b1 gains a tempo against the pawn on b7, and if you can get the rook over to f3, then the king's really in a little bit of trouble there. So d5, not the engine's favourite move, but again, I think it's pretty much the one that all humans would play. Obviously, e takes d5, e6 is really, really terrible for black. But bishop f4 was a clever move from Bogolyubov. What you're doing, well, you're attacking the pawn on h2, so Stahlberg didn't want to allow that to happen. And the key point is that, you know, you're going to be able to play queen g5. You're going to actually try and absorb this this central push from white. You're going to allow white to play d takes c6, but you're going to start attacking this pawn, for example, that's now been weakened. So Bogolyubov played rook h7. Just want to hide the king behind the rook, basically. It's a nice idea. Rook h6 is what the engines wanted, protecting the c6 pawn, and basically trying to do pretty much the same thing. Rook h7, rook h6, much of a muchness for me, basically, but rook h6 was the engine choice. So rook b1 now, hitting the pawn on b7, and it's not just about attacking the pawn on b7, it's also about getting the rook onto b3, ready to come to f3 and attack the bishop on f4. I mean, what do you try and do in this type of position? It's a bit hard, you know, really to know, you know, exactly what to do for black. But what the engines wanted was something like rook b8, and then bishop e8, and then try and play queen g5 and just try and line up on this pawn. But yeah, it's all getting, you know, rather confusing. And of course, the key thing for white is that this king side is pretty solid. Bishop on g4, pawn on h3. You can take the pawn on g2 whenever you want. And you're just going to be trying to get maybe a rook into d5 or a rook into d7 even. Sacrifice the rook on there, get, a passed pawn on d7. Very, very difficult for black. And the players were already in quite a bit of time trouble already. So, it's really pretty confusing. Minus 0.78, still the engine evaluation. So still thinking that that white's better, but it's just getting more and more complicated. And rook d5, I'm sure Stahlberg was pretty happy when he did that. I mean, rook's on d5, protecting the pawn on e5. G2's going. I mean, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns now. Black's only got 2. Actually, white's even got a material advantage. And we're actually looking to maybe double up and eventually move a rook onto d7 or onto d8. Not obvious how black's really gonna start getting at the white position. So rook e7 was played, rook bd1. And now bishop g6. So I mean, black's looking for something like king g7 and trying to use the two bishops to attack these pawns. I mean, the engines here wanted to play queen f3 simply, and after king g8 to go rook d7, there rook d5. So you sort of upgrade the placement of the two rooks. The rook on d5 moves to d7, the rook on d1 moves to d5, and this is tremendously complicated. I mean, we're just going to go king g2 afterwards. I mean, we're threatening obviously rook e7 and rook takes c5 here. So rook g7 takes, king g2, well, the engines were agreeing a draw very quickly afterwards, but I wouldn't mind white here somehow. I mean, I think black's got to try and sort of start offering the exchange of queens and hope that the pressure against e4, that he can stop white from playing f4, and then black should still have should have decent chances. But the winners has long sailed. Stahlberg played the move rook d8 check, which is a little bit of a mistake according to the engines, because here black could actually just play bishop e8, and well, the e5 pawn is going, and obviously we can look at stuff like bishop e5 and queen f4 if you don't quite get it right. Actually, even after king g2, the engines wanted to play rook takes e6, exploiting that pin. Queen a3 check, king g8, rook a8, rook takes e5, queen takes a7. Yeah, still a bit of a mess, and well, with only one pawn left, it's hard to imagine that black will be able to win this, especially with the the pin, the king cut off on the 7th rank like that. It just feels like white should be able to hold this. Lots of draws as well, but still better for white. But after king g7, we're at 0.00. And Stahlberg took his opportunity and went queen c8. So, yeah, in actual fact now, best play here is going to be a draw. Simply, white's got so much play now that black's only can make a draw, and it doesn't actually really look very easy for black to get at the white king. So any result's possible. Queen e5 played, and now rook h8, and we're threatening queen f8 checkmate here. So really, all the danger has come about here. Bogolyubow used his last chance, which was bishop h2 check, forcing the king onto g2, and now bishop e4. And this was the absolutely crucial moment. Both sides in huge time trouble. And if Stahlberg had played king f1, he would have had a draw here. It's not 100% obvious to see, but black hasn't actually got any more than a draw by repetition here. Queen b1 check after queen b1 check, or queen b4 check. I think king f1, queen b5, this is possible. If you go to b1, you can go bishop d1 as well and block like that. And then queen b4 check, I think you go king f1, queen b5, king e1. So, perpetuals all over the place, but black doesn't have any way to really get closer to the white king there. But unfortunately, just after this incredible defense, Stahlberg played bishop f3, and after takes, queen d5 check, which I imagine he'd missed. Bogolyubow, Stahlberg rather, had to resign. The king, I imagine that he was sort of expecting something like Queen F5 or whatever, and the king comes back, attacks the bishop, and you've still got all your mating threats. But after King D5, the king can't come back to G2. It has to move to the center. And if you go to E2, then we've just got rook takes E6 check, and obviously you're going to be mating there. And if King G4, you can just go something like, well, Queen E4 check actually is just going to mate. You could even play, you know, if you were absolutely desperate and in time trouble, Queen E6 check would force the exchange of queens with a winning endgame as well. So, you know, just whatever you do there, it's just all completely winning for black. So that was a real shame for Stahlberg. This blunder, bishop f3. Turned what would have been an amazing save into a loss, but still a very interesting game. And yeah, you know, just interesting to see. I mean, always interesting to see how many difficulties the you know, human players do have to convert. I mean, you've got a position -3 for white after 12-13 moves, and well, you know, black was almost in danger of losing it somehow. I mean, mating threats all around his king at you know, by the end of the game. But I think also very interesting to see how yeah, you know, a player like Bogolyubow was yeah, just very you know, on the lookout in the opening, even against the boring stuff like the exchange Slav, on the lookout for some great ways to create play in the opening. And well, this move knight e4, this came back in modern times, you know, as a way to play against the exchange Slav and avoid the you know, the dullness that came from the symmetrical lines with bishop f5. So yeah, you know, interesting to see that popping out in the 1930s. So there we are. Hope you're enjoying this series. Still got a few very interesting games from Stahlberg to come. I'm not just having a look at his wins. A little bit strange maybe, but yeah, I mean, he had some fantastic tussles with the best players, and yeah, you know, some he drew, some he won, some he lost, but yeah, those tended to be those enormous battles. Obviously, the ones that you tend to get attracted to, because I think you know, a lot of Stahlberg's wins were just very solid, you know, controlled affairs. But yeah, he had that hint of devilry in him, and the ones where he got provoked often, you know, provided the very most entertainment. And yeah, a game like this one against Bogolyubow. So there we are. Hope you're enjoying this. Don't forget to like or subscribe if you're enjoying it, and well, keep your eyes peeled for lots more videos in this series. Thanks for watching.